I've always been pretty claustrophobic. I've felt incredibly uncomfortable in elevators my whole life, and pretty much any small space. They make me feel like it's hard to breathe, and the world is closing in on me. It terrifies me. Back in the 8th grade, there was a lot of transition and change in my life. My family had moved to another smaller town. I had my first sort of girlfriend. I got a dog, and I became more responsible overall. A lot happened that year, some good and some very bad. I was in a class of 24 kids, some of them decent and well-behaved, and others obnoxious and horrible in every way. The teachers never saw how the kids really were. I didn't like a lot of the kids at school, and I didn't have the urge to make tons of friends. I've never been extroverted. As I walked through the halls that became gradually more similar each time, I felt something. It was an eerie feeling, and I noticed it more and more as time passed. I felt claustrophobic when I walked through the halls. The halls felt too small, and it was very unsettling to me. The whole feeling I got from the school was very unsettling, and I truly didn't want to be there. It was something beyond kids being hard on me, or teachers being complete a-holes. It was something much past that, on a different level. I was in homeroom, and we were doing math at that time. The teacher was eyeing 2 kids who were whispering and giggling to themselves during a lesson. The teacher was a man in his 50s, wearing clothing that was too big for him, and I had the feeling that he took himself too seriously. I sat right behind the kids in question, and I could pick up a bit on what they said. It was a joke about the teacher, Mr. R. It was something about him and his wife. I really don't care enough to try and recall more specifics other than that. Mr. R stopped what he was saying about algebra and just stared at the kids. The kids were so focused on their conversation that they didn't notice exactly when he stopped. The whole class caught the word retarded at the end of their sentences, and so did Mr. R. When they stopped talking, the whole room was completely silent. This silence hung for about a full minute before anyone actually did anything. Mr. R said nothing as he reached for a bell on his desk. This bell had some sort of writing engraved on it, and it was rusting over. He rang the bell several times, and then simply set it back down. I was as confused as everyone else, and it was the strangest thing I've ever seen a teacher do. Mr. R resumed the lesson exactly where he left off, and the day went on like any other day after that. Over the next month or so, the 2 kids were acting strange. They would ask to be excused every 15 minutes or so, and would often go home because of headaches. I walked into the bathroom one day to see the younger one of them standing in the corner, facing the wall. Near the end of this month, they acted strange in a different way. They would yell and scream at teachers, or mutter strange things under their breath. I noticed this from the both of them, and I found it to be very interesting. I only picked up a couple of the things they said under their breath. "You can't let it in," and "do it," were the only things I heard them mutter. Then they just disappeared. At the end of the month, they just vanished. It happened while they were on school property. The oldest asked to be excused from class to go to the washroom, and he did. 15 minutes later, the youngest followed. Neither of them ever came back to class. A week later, they were still nowhere to be seen. I was walking through the hall alone to the washroom, feeling the claustrophobia more than ever this time. I entered the washroom to use the urinal. When I was nearly done, I heard something. It was very indistinct, nearly indistinguishable from the other sounds of the restroom. I still knew I heard something, quiet as it may be. There was a tiny tapping noise coming from the air vent. It sounded very intentional, like someone wrapping their finger on the car window to get the driver's attention, only much quieter. I finished, and slowly approached the air vent, my heart beating faster than it should. I peered into the air vent, cupping my hands around my eyes. I heard a slight shuffling sound from deep in the vents, and I was beginning to back away faster than I had come. Then I heard a completely coherent whispered sentence from deep in the vents.
"You can't let it in."
I ran out of there as fast as I could, yelling loudly for all the classes in the hall to hear. I collapsed on the floor and began to calm myself, to rationalize with myself. I found that to be difficult. A week later, I kind of recovered. I actually believe that it was just my mind playing tricks on me, however the hell that happens. The night I heard the talking from the vent, I dreamed about myself being trapped in an air vent. I was stuck in the small vent, Barely able to breathe as I heard whispers from behind me. I began crawling to the exit, to safety. I heard the whispers becoming shouts, turning into screaming, and then something grabbed my ankle. I was entirely helpless as I was dragged deep into the darkness of the vent.
You can't let it in.
I woke up screaming that night. My parents rushing to my room. I told them I had a bad dream, and they tried to console me. They couldn't stop the idea of being trapped in the vent from circulating into my head. Over the next week, I rationalized the whole occurrence. My claustrophobia combined with the disappearance of 2 classmates had caused a minor hallucination. This made no sense to me, but somehow it set my mind somewhat at ease for a week or so. A week passed and it was Friday. I needed to go to the restroom, so I asked the teacher if I could go, and he said yes. I went to a different washroom than I had before, and that made me feel a little bit safer. I pushed open the big red metal door, then the next. I went to a urinal. This time, the noise I heard was sudden and caught me by surprise. I finished using the urinal and went to wash my hands. As I was washing my hands, I heard a noise. It was a deep, unnatural sound. Have you ever heard throats singing? Well, it sounded similar to that, only deeper and more raspy. The sound resonated from the vent, around the room, and into my terrified ears. I ran from the washroom, crying at this point. Each vent I passed on my way to the room produced a sickly sound, the type of sound that could make me vomit. It rang through the hallways, seeming to follow my every step. I opened the door to the class and shut it behind me. I stood still for a moment, stunned, as the class stared at me. Then, I heard the sound again from the vent at the back of the class. I started screaming, and the class broke out into confusion and panic. As I screamed, I saw the vent cover fall off to the floor. From the blackness of the vent, a body was shoved out by something. The body of Graham Klein fell from the vent, later recognized as the older boy of the missing 2. A second or two later, after Graham's body fell, so did Joey's. Joey Crook, age 12, fell from the vent, landing on top of Graham. Both of their corpses had been rotting, and teeth marks were found on their arms, legs, and necks. The ear vents had dried blood and rotting flesh scattered throughout. I guess the smell wasn't dead rats. My eyes flutter open to a dark room, greeted by a small amount of light trickling through the curtains, shifting my weight to roll over. It comes to my attention that I am incredibly thirsty. My mouth felt like I had eaten salted cotton, that kind of thirsty. I pushed my covers down and swing my legs over the edge of my bed, causing the bed frame to squeak, causing my wife to stir. "Sweetie, where are you going?" she asks me. I groggily respond, telling her I'm getting some water. She grumbles about me waking her up. Standing up, I head to the kitchen. Once I reach the sink, I turn on the faucet, lean down, and place my mouth against the flow of the water. I was too tired to be bothered to get a cup. The ice-cold water crashes into my dry lips, bringing immediate refreshment. After having my fill, I turn off the faucet and begin to head back to bed. Halfway there, nature gave an oh-so-familiar call. Heading into the bathroom, I hear my wife tossing and turning in bed. Smiling to myself, I close the bathroom door and proceed to relieve myself. I turn to the sink and start washing my hands. The combination of cold water and light woke me up more than I would have liked. I hear more rustling in the bedroom. I freeze as it dawns on me. I turn to the door and turn the lock just before the doorknob starts to jiggle. A voice calls out,
Come to bed, sweetie.
"I live alone."